So welcome, everybody. This is one of our mid-month, midweek Wednesday virtual Zoom events. I will say that we've had Larry Davidson, and Leslie's going to give one in the future. Jeff gave one on buying and selling used equipment a number of months ago. I am looking for people who have an interest in a particular subject they would like to be a moderator for. Can everyone mute themselves right now, other than me, because I'm getting some feedback. That would be great if you could go ahead and do that. And then when we start doing our round robin, we'll unmute each person and let them have some time to talk. Fantastic. So anyway, but if you have an interest in a particular subject matter and you would like to moderate a talk on one of the Wednesdays, please reach out to me at jimb@audiophilefoundation.org. It's on our website, and I would love to speak with you about that and get you booked, because we have a number of openings between now to the end of the year, and going forward, we'll have more openings next year as well. So today's talk is going to be about favorite tweaks, and what I was hoping we'd do, depending upon what people want to do today, I was thinking a number of you will have, hopefully thought of a tweak that you've done with your system. And for me, a tweak is something that can be applied to pretty much every system, as opposed to a modification where you go in and you change a circuit and an amp, or, add, this is kind of borderline, but, add some kind of RF blocking material inside of a device, although that might be considered a tweak. But I was thinking more in terms of isolation devices. I'm going to be talking about a record clamp or a record weight that I particularly like. And if you don't have anything you want to offer up to talk about, that's fine. Maybe you'll have something to comment about one of the other devices or the other tweaks. So the way I'm going to start this today, I'm going to start the first one because I'm moderating, and that's just the way it's going to be. And I'm going to give myself 5 minutes to present this, and then people will be able to, if they have a picture or something, they can share their screen. And then we will do 5 minutes at a time, because we have quite a number of people. And then if you have more than one tweak you want to talk about, then we can come back around to you again. If I'm going to try to remember everyone who I've picked on, so to speak, to talk. And if I forgot you, just use the raise your hand button at the bottom, and we will get back to you. So today I'm going to talk about, for myself, I have this is the Origin Live Gravity 1 record weight, record clamp. Doesn't really clamp on anything. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? Just nod your head. Okay, so this is from their website, and this is a very light. It weighs about 67 grams. It sits on top of the spindle, and it's not tight. It just sits loosely on the spindle, and it's not necessarily even perfectly in the very center of the record. There can be a little eccentricity as it spins around, and that initially freaked me out a little bit, but I did email them, and they say that is not a problem because of the weight of this. Here's a picture of the device. You can show, this is showing it on a record. And from a side view, you can see it does not sit, the main plastic outer casing does not sit on the record. This is the underside of it. And you can see there is a center plastic piece. This does rest on the record, and the spindle obviously goes in there. This wood piece is not attached to the outer plastic ring. It's attached to it at the top, but it will move within this. And there is a really nice, there's a bunch of reviews, but I like this review from Positive Feedback. It really describes my experience. I have an SME 20 table with a 5-arm, and the very heavy weight It's a reflex clamp that you screw down and it flattens the record against the plinth, well, against the record. It clamps it down. And with my original weight, it certainly has a little bit more bass and maybe a little bit more drive, but it definitely, compared to using this, it muddles up the mid-range. And on large pieces with a lot of complexity, especially classical or big jazz pieces, using this absolutely creates a lot more clarity, a little bit more microdynamics, I would say, and a more three-dimensionality. And I tried, like in the positive feedback, I tried, I'm going to finish getting out of here. I tried taking off no record clamp, and it was maybe a little brighter than using my big heavy clamp, but I didn't think it was that much of an improvement. But just putting on this 67-gram weight on top of it, the jump in clarity was, for me, astonishing. And canceling out vibration. I don't, there's lots of people talk about how they think it works. I'm not quite sure, but it's very, very reproducible on my system. Anyway, so that's my favorite recent tweak. Again, Origin Live, Gravity One, record weight.
Taking questions now or later?
I will take a few questions right now.
With the disclaimer that I'm a digital guy, I'm curious if the clamp helps with a warped record, and I'm also curious if it poses any risk to the turntable bearing because of the added weight.
Right. It's not, I asked about bearings to Origin Live. They said because of the weight, the effect, even if it's slightly off center, is negligible to zero, in their words. It does nothing for a warped record. So if I have a even slightly warped record, I can't use this because at least I have a SME5 arm and I use a Kaiseki cartridge, which is not very high, and it can fault on a record. So my reflex clamp or a heavier clamp will definitely flatten it out. This doesn't flatten anything. It doesn't, it's weighs so little, it really would do nothing for a warped record. Any other questions?
Jim, I was a little bit late because I
Yeah.
I noticed you had what looked like a spreadsheet kind of thing, or can you pass?
It was from their website. It's a description of how it's made and how much it weighs. And if you go to positive feedback, there is a review of it that goes into quite a bit of detail. And as I mentioned earlier, their description of it really coincides with what I found using it in my system. So I'm going to move on because we have a number of people who who would like to give up their favorite tweak in their system next? Okay, I start with Steve. Why don't you unmute yourself, and then we'll get to Brian next.
The main one that I think is fairly consistent across the board for me has to do with isolation. And it's usually a pedestal or the feet. It may relate to speakers. It could relate to source equipment, pretty much anything that is susceptible to vibrations of any kind. And even in the face of designers who claim, no, that's not going to matter, like my Revel salons upstairs that Kevin Vokes screamed at me, no, don't use anything but my feet. And I put an isolation under that, and it definitely improved at least my living condition. So I was not getting, massive vibrations throughout the house when I hit low frequencies. But it also mattered and radically in my racks from HRS out of Buffalo, I forgot what the name of Harmonic Resolution Systems. They make racks. So the designer of that actually recommended that initially I use some of their Vortex feet underneath my DAC and comparing it to other isolation feet, it was like a world of difference. But he had specifically tested it himself with the DCS gear. And then I used the same underneath my Grimm MU1 streamer. And again, it made a significant difference. So I guess the point is that a lot of the designers work in their own world and they don't necessarily think about potentially how some of these tweaks might positively impact the overall effect. And that gets to some of the points that I made to you in an email, having to do with fuses, having to do with some of Ted Denny's exotic little devices that he actually puts inside of equipment. You just never know what you might uncover. On the other hand, you're never sure whether it's positive or negative unless you live with it for a long time. But that's the net of my experience with tweaks.
Okay.
And other than mods that go back to the days when I built speakers and I would mod crossovers and mod, you name it. Like as I mentioned to you, my original thinking of mods was taking a stock car and modifying it, right? That's the automotive mod.
Very
Any
good.
questions? Any questions?
You describe a little bit what, okay, so remind me, which are your favorite isolation devices, and then describe in some detail what they do to the sound.
Okay, so the two units that I use on my rack and the rack is an HRS rack. Actually, I've got two of them. And I'm using a product that is their top of the line platform called the Vortex. And so what it essentially is doing is minimizing vibrations that are coming both from the platform that it's sitting on, as well as minimizing airborne vibrations. And I also have some others that I use underneath one of my switches that make a slight difference. But again, the major difference is minimizing any kind of noise or any kind of jitter or any kind of extraneous clutter, let's put it that way, that I may be getting in the soundstage or in the depth or in the frequency range. It's
So when
sometimes
you do tests with and without it, if you don't have those isolation devices, you hear the clutter.
I hear some of the clutter, and I don't get as delineated a sound stage or as black a background.
Thank
I think
you. Yeah,
the black background is the key, I think, to me, more so than anything else.
thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Stephen, maybe if we get back around, I don't know if you have any white paper on it, you could talk about, because the HRS, they, great reputation, not
Right.
cheap, but I don't really even know myself what kind of composite material or why they feel it does a particularly good job versus and why you should pay that kind of money for it. Not
Yeah,
to-
I'll just say that I don't have much information. If you go to their website, you're not going to find a great deal of detail.
Okay, fair enough.
So
Okay. All right, let's move on to Brian. Unmute yourself and
Hi, everybody. I want to take 30 seconds to amplify and wholeheartedly concur with Steve. Vibration control matters. And if you ever have any doubt, remember at some point in your journey, you might have tapped on a vacuum tube with a screwdriver, which is ill-advised if you have a $1,500 pair of 300 Bs. I don't recommend tapping the hot tube. However, hardly anybody I know has never tapped on a tube, and I'm dating myself back to TV repair days. And if you heard the ting, ting, ting through the speaker, you know that that tube is microphonic, which is why you see these little dampers from companies like Audio Research. So the point being, I take too long to get to the point. Sorry, Jim. Every DAC I have owned, including high-end playback designs and Lumen streaming DAC, which is my primary source today, every one of them has benefited from vibration control. So you can see in the background of my picture, I use a Box Furniture Company rack. That helped. But I also use Iso Acoustics pucks. under my lumen. But the thingy tweak I wanted to just briefly talk about, I have a purely passive device in the room from a German company called HighEnd Novum. You may have seen it at an audio show. It is a cast bronze bell-like device on a stand. It's very thin. If you flick it with your fingernail, it rings like a bell, and my wife fondly calls it the dinger. And what it does, if it's anywhere in the room, and we can hear the difference if it's in the room, it is a resonator, and it changes the room acoustic to sound more like a hall. So, you know, by the time I got a carpet and a rug pad and a sofa and window treatments in the room was frankly dead and boring and sounded very hi-fi. But with this PMR, it's called a passive multivocal, because it's many frequencies, passive multivocal resonator in the room sounds a whole lot more alive, and it is strikingly clearer, plucked instruments. We listen a lot to what my wife calls pickers. And when the guitar strings are plucked, the difference in the clarity of the acoustic guitar in particular, it's like a real guitar is in the room versus listening to a canned recording of a guitar.
Brian, can you turn your iPad just away from you and point it towards?
Oh, those are really large. I thought that.
There it is. Well,
It's
that's
a
large. I've seen some very small ones.
Yeah, they make a small one, but I started with the large one because it came out first, and I believe it does the most. You can see from the side how thin it is.
Mhm.
Let's see.
Interesting.
How do you set it
And
up?
And
It's totally-
it's ideally placed between the speakers. I can't do that here because
Right.
of the TV. So the
Yeah.
next best is to put it at shoulder level and basically over your left shoulder behind
Wow.
the couch. It sounds goofy, I know, but all it really matters is that it's in the room. So
Mhm.
I think it's not so much a reflector. Maybe it reflects a little bit, but it's a fundamentally a resonator. And I was persuaded to buy it after a dealer who called himself the audio doctor put these little precious metal bullets around the room, platinum and gold and silver. Do you remember what those are called, Steve? They made such an obvious difference, but I was unwilling to spend $10,000 on buying these little platinum dots.
Yeah.
And so I read many reviews of this multivocal resonator, and I liked that it worked across a broad swath of frequencies and not just, say cymbals.
Hey,
It's
Brian,
quite,
I'm going to cut you off because we got a lot of people and a lot of things to talk about. We can come back to this, but thank you for. Whoop! Did I push him away? No. He's a good friend of mine.
he's here.
Friend, so it's okay. I'm not worried. So let's move on to another device. Does someone else, if you have a device or a tweak you want to share and talk about, just raise your hand. No one else? Oh, okay. Ori.
Yeah, okay. So first comment about the last room. There was a TV between the speakers. So the standard tweak there is to cover the TV when you play music seriously. It distorts, it reflects too much audio and distorts the 3D effect, essentially. And you should try it, at least. That's the easiest tweak ever. I was surprised how well it worked with my TV at the time. And I have a few simple tweaks, real tweaks, like you don't buy much, and you should try it at least. They're very easy. So the first thing, we started with the turntables. So I have my standard tweak for a turntable. This is, I assume you can see, this is basically a foam drawer liner.
Mm-hmm.
One of the very light ones. I mean, it's very squishy. And what you do is basically take a CD, put it on top, and cut exactly around the CD. And that gives you a center of an LP. You should give it a try. It will change a little bit the height, of course, so you may need to tweak your VTA on a turntable, but it gives you extreme isolation. Essentially, there are tiny dots in there that touch the label of the LP, not the grooves, okay? And the grooves on the bottom side of the yeah.
Please, everybody, mute yourself if you're not Ori. Go ahead and mute yourself and then unmute when it's your turn to talk. Thank you.
So Ori, could
Yeah.
you repeat the last two sentences?
Yeah, so basically you put this, of course, in the center on the spindle, and with the dots upwards, and then you lay the LP on top of that. The label is touching those dots. And adjust the VTA, because this will raise it probably 1.5 millimeters or 2 millimeters, and give it a try. I found extremely great isolation with especially with turntables that don't have a lot of isolation, like Regas or any of the thin metal platters that don't weigh 20 pounds upwards. Okay, so, and extremely easy to do. Just you can even find it at the dollar store. So, and make like 50 of those.
That's a great tweak. Fantastic.
So Ori, do you use that with a record clamp?
I don't see any reason why not. But if you're trying to flatten the record,
No, so I'm not necessarily flattening the records. We're just clamping it tightly to the heavy platter.
I think it defeats the purpose. I think it gives you the isolation that the clamp was supposed to create. Like the clamp is supposed to change the interface between the label or the LP surface and the platter. And this is what this does. It basically gives you a different interface.
So in your mind, what is it isolating? What is it eliminating?
So vibrations. It's mainly vibrations. So if you get vibrations coming through the platter shaft, the spindle, or through the platter, maybe the motor, into the platter, they don't move up into the record surface and into your cartridge. Okay.
Okay, let's move on, and then if you have another tweak, but let's let someone else, and then we'll get back to you. Next person, does someone else have a tweak they would like to present? Something homemade, something they baked, something.
Well, this is not something I've actually tried, but it's something that I've been reading about. So can I present that? Does that sound reasonable?
Sure, go ahead, Greg.
This goes along with that resonating dish that I forget the gentleman's
Brian Wilson, yeah.
And I'm going to put a link in the chat, and then I'll share my screen because I think it's going to be the easiest way to do it. And so the link is now in the chat. And how do I share screen here? Let's see, it's a Japanese doorbell that you can get from AliExpress for 99 cents. Is this being shared now? Do you see a screen?
Yes, you see it.
And my understanding is that you can put these around the room and they have the same kind of effect as some of the other smaller bells, but they're 99 cents a piece. They don't cost multiple hundreds or thousands of dollars. And so it has I'm very much interested in these because, you know, you can order, you know, 20 of these things for 20 bucks, you know, and that includes free shipping. So, you know, you can put them wherever you want and check them out. And if they work, they work. And if they don't, well, you're out, you know, 10 bucks or 20 bucks or however many you get.
Greg, have you read any reviews either on, you know, Audio Asylum or AudioGone, the forums, or people who've actually used them and could speak to the effect that they had with them?
I just started exploring this, so I'm looking for those reviews now. So forgive my ignorance, but I see no reason why. I also know that, you know, Ted Denny.
Yeah. I just put a link into Absolute Sound review of his art system, which, by the way, is still being used by music lovers in their big room. And it,
Ted Denny stuff, aren't they?
yeah, Ted's got some interesting stuff that it comes and goes, and he iterates like crazy. But that art system, which is very similar to the thing you just showed, is placed along with other kinds of devices in the room, and
yeah,
it's his magic that he doesn't explain very well, and it's voodoo, and it's until you actually use it.
that is that it's not really patentable, and it's what would fall into the category of trade secret, and so no one's going to give you. It's not just TED stuff. A lot of people have this stuff. That, you know, that's why, you know, HRX doesn't tell you how their racks work or what they're doing on those things. That's, you know, because it's probably very simple, basic principles with the correct material science, you know, attached to it, that if you actually could do that, you could build it yourself fairly easily. And I'm guessing for a fraction of what they're charging, you know. To be honest, I'd rather buy these things than anything from Ted Denny for that matter. But I've got personal issues against that guy, and I won't go into that.
No, it's not.
I'll say I'm not alone in that.
Thank you, Greg. Roberto from Chicago, you're on, man. We got someone from Chicago, I think is great.
So good afternoon, San Francisco, and good evening, Chicago. I was introduced to the Audiophile Society at Expona this past April, and I was fortunate enough to win the F7 first watt amp. So I'm the first watt recipient. And, you know, whoever picked that, you know, that's I got to give it to him, her, but it's just been a musical journey for the past maybe couple of months. And that's been the tweak. Class A, I'm new to Class A, and to me, you know, the clarity that the F7 is having in my system, allowing me to kind of listen to all the nuances of the music that I was completely missing, the mids, the highs, the lows. I have two rels, T9X, so I control the lows. So it's just been a really nice journey. The tweak, aside from that I recently did, I'm in a basement, it's all carpeted. I added a couple of thick, like 1-inch granite slabs underneath my speakers. It did take away the vibration. I need the vibration to feel so I might take them off, but what it allowed me to, it's to move them around and really find that sweet spot. Because if they're on carpet, it becomes a little bit of a hassle to move them around, because I have Sonus Faber, so I have the little plates. I was looking at ISO acoustics. I don't know if that will make sense in my room, but that's the tweak that I have, the amp and the granite slabs. Not too happy with the lack of vibration that I'm having right now, but I'm just happy with the sound experience that I'm getting.
I recommend that you contact I'm trying to remember the name of the company, and I'll find it and get it up in a link. But basically, there's a guy out in your area I think he's in either Ohio or in Illinois, who makes isolation devices of various kinds, including different ones based upon the kind of equipment that you have, how heavy it is, etc. And it might be something worth investigating or even contacting him, because he's very, very good about that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's AV Room Service.
That's it.
And
Thank
it's
you,
Norm
Larry.
Varney, and he's in Cleveland, I believe.
Cleveland. Okay, I knew it was Ohio. I knew it was around there somewhere.
What's the name of the company?
AV Room Service. Is that the?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It looks like
Gregory put
someone
the link. Gregory
put
put
the
the
link.
link in the chat. So
Thank you.
thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
I don't need to, the
Yeah.
vibrations, it's a single family home, so it's a concrete flooring. So it's just not, it just became easier to move the speakers around to find the sweet spot. That's the only reason. So while I do have the sweet spot now, I am missing a little bit of that vibration, real life concert type environment.
Got it.
Okay.
All you Californians can eat your hearts out. How many of you have concrete floors?
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Is someone want to raise their hand? Kwa? Yeah, okay. You want to go ahead and, oh, I saw that Magnus too. So, well, I said Kwa. So why don't you do Kwa and then we'll go to Magnus.
I'll be brief. I wouldn't, it's not really a tweak, but one of the things that made just a really striking difference in a small room that I had with some big speakers back in the day were tube traps. And I know everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with them, but I was fortunate to be able to have the local dealer in Palo Alto bring over like a truckload of them, literally a box truck full of tube traps, and we could try and experiment with all different ones. And man, it was striking the problems that it solved acoustically. So just a thumbs up for tube traps. Power chords, I've had subtle but noticeable differences with power chords, and I have not put them on a very high-end system, but that's something. But one of the things that cracked me up, I was just thinking back in the 80s, there was you could buy a little, like a nail polish sized bottle, literally called Tweak, I think was the name of the product. And you'd paint it on the contacts of your speaker cables attached to the amp. And it's just, acetone. I mean, it's just something that was supposedly to make a better molecular connection between the surfaces of the metal. And I just did it out of faith, so I can't say that it made any difference. I haven't tried some of the real exotic, weird tweaks, but I've seen in some rooms these ones, maybe it's Ted Denny, I don't know, but they're like wooden squiggle things that you are like on a pole. They stand up sort of chest level height in a room, and they're like wooden squiggly shapes that you put around the room, and it's supposed to do something. One of the weirder things I've seen, can't say that I could hear a difference. But isolation, I was at the Rado room at Rocky Mountain show a few years ago, and they demonstrated some isolation pucks that were pretty expensive that they sold, but they put them under anything they put them under and took them off. You could hear the difference in the room. I mean, it was mind-blowing to me because I didn't expect them to do anything. And they were they put them under cables, under amps, under anything they put them under, and then took them away. You could hear the difference. So
I find it's not hard to hear a difference with a lot of tweaks. And as Steve mentioned earlier, whether or not you're going to end up liking it in the long term, because some things initially you get a great increase in maybe detail, but after a while it's like it just doesn't sound like live music. It's too high pitched. The bass, I lost my bass. As like Roberto was talking about, it may make it much leaner, which for certain cuts, certain types of music might be better, but as a whole, maybe not. But that's
I totally agree. But it's remarkable that some devices, it's sort of counterintuitive. You just hard to get unless you know something about the physics, which they usually don't share really in depth. It's kind of astounding to see that some things make a differences that you would be surprised, you know. So I kind of lean into it. I'm kind of in favor of trying something, but I think it'll make a difference. But I haven't actually invested in very much myself. So that's really all I had.
Fair enough, Qua. Thank you
Thank-
very much. Okay, Magnus, why don't you unmute yourself and let us see who we're talking with? Unless you're
Yeah,
gonna.
sorry, I don't have a camera right now.
Okay, no worries. We'll
You
just.
know, I don't
listen.
really have a tweak, but I have a question for you guys that you might be able to explain something to me. Both my rack, my equipment rack, and my speakers are standing on spikes, so they're tightly connected to the floor. But it seems to me, maybe I'm totally off here. It seems to me that if you use these isolation devices, isn't that like the other extreme? You get a very weak coupling between your equipment and the floor. So how does it work?
I can
depends.
say one thing. I think it depends. Yeah, as Steve said, it depends on the floor. It depends on the room. There were some rooms and some kinds of speakers where having a direct coupling to the floor is an improvement. There's going to be other types of speakers and definitely certain types of floors where it absolutely will not be an improvement.
If you're on a concrete slab, floating your speakers might not be as effective as if you're on a springy floor.
Mhm.
And I'm having a flashback. To me, the original purpose of isolation was to avoid upsetting the record when you tiptoed across the room.
Right.
Right.
But the other thing also is when you look at the design of a lot of the racks, they may be well positioned, or I should say, the rack itself is designed to be maintaining a very strong contact to the floor, but then usually the individual tables, if you want to call it that, whatever, the shelves themselves are then floated on top of the rack. So the idea is to isolate every one of the shelves. And like on mine, I've got 4 different shelves on each of 2 racks. So basically 8 shelves. And each of those is floated, and they're all designed, at least in the case of how HRS does their thing, is it's based upon the weight of the product that you're putting on there. And they even make changes to the way the table is balanced, so that if you have something like, I have a pair of spectral amps that are very heavy in the rear as opposed to the front, and so they make adjustments for that too. So you can get a lot of customization, and if you're willing to throw a lot of money at things, and I'm one of those idiots, you know, you can get pretty much anything you want, and hopefully it'll make a significant difference. I've been lucky with working with the guys at HRS, but you know, there are so many factors. I mean, we're dealing with rooms that vibrate, and one of the things that you have as an advantage, if you're not on a concrete type floor, or even if you are, the speakers themselves are going to radiate to the walls, and the walls are then going to go to the ceiling. And if you have an upstairs, you'll hear strange things when you're in the bathroom. I mean, it can get pretty crazy.
But before you throw a lot of money at it, experiment. I mean, you all,
No, you're right.
no offense to anybody in the room, but you look old enough, all of you, to remember Enid Lumley.
Of course.
And she would turn components upside down and claim that they sounded better upside down. It's goofy sounding, but what she was really discovering is various components behave like a microphone. And if your source component, think of the tapping the tube analogy, if your source component, whether it's a DAC or a turntable, acts like a microphone, then you're asking your amplifier to amplify that signal and play it back through the chain, and bad things happen.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I think trying to turn the turntable upside down would be fraught with issues, but let's move on.
But I remember some of the CD designs that were just that way, right?
Jim,
Matt,
I'm profoundly disappointed that no one has talked about the green felt tip pen on the CD.
Well, once we get around to everybody else, if you want to bring that up again, that's fine. I wanted to ask Magnus if that answered your question for the most part.
I think it did. I'm still a little bit confused about it. I mean, my equipment standing on a parquet floor. It's not really a mushy floor, but it's a wooden floor. So I guess I was expecting a more straightforward answer. Yeah, keep the spikes, or no, try these other things.
I think the answer is if you can easily try it without spikes on something else, or you have something you could put this, a simple thing would be you can buy, there's kind of rubber cork, rubber little squares, and you can actually buy, they sell expensive versions of them, but you can go to stores that sell isolation for water heaters, and you can get them on Amazon and buy them for pennies. And if you were to get like maybe a couple cutting boards that you put the spikes onto, but you put these rubber cork rubber footers under that onto your floor to isolate it so the spike isn't digging into your hardwood or your wood floor. I mean, that might be a way of playing with it, but I think you just have to try it.
Yeah.
And I think what everyone, the theme here is that if you won't know unless you tried, because how things are described in the audio rags or other people's opinions, until you try it in your room on your system with your equipment, you really don't know.
Hey, Jim.
But Art definitely did.
And those devices that you're talking about, they're designed for a washing machine that weighs like 300 or 400 pounds. Okay. For a device to work, you've got to basically have it loading to the point where it actually has give both ways. So if you have using a thing that's designed for a 300-pound washing machine, and you put a 20-pound CD player on it or preamplifier on it, it'll do nothing.
Well, I would beg to differ, because I've used them on.
You're not giving it enough load to actually provide isolation.
I think that's a very reasonable concern about them, but again, until you try it, maybe it won't work, maybe it will work, maybe it's in your mind it's working. But I've played with them and I hear differences. I don't always like what I hear, but it definitely has an effect on the sound every time I try it under something. So
I think Greg's point is very good, but that maybe depends on how the particular isolation device is designed.
True.
So if it has a spring in there that is active, and then they have critical damping of the spring or whatever, the critical damping will depend on the mass of what you put on it. And obviously, as Greg pointed out, it won't work if you don't compress the spring at all. But there are other isolation types of devices, I think.
this is true. I think speaking of the rubber cork rubber ones that I buy cheaply for washing machines and things like that versus the more expensive ones that kind of look the same, but they may well have different densities and different properties. I mean, it's a very real point to make. Anyone else have a tweak they want to talk about? Don?
I actually, one of the tweaks, we had a cable shootout at my house months ago. And I wanted to mention this because I see Fred is not online, but Fred Stanky wrote an article that got published.
So I'm hiding in plain sight here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to compliment him. I mean, the difference that those power cords made with the ferrites on it was just mind-boggling. It was a hell of an improvement. But during that cable evaluation that we did, that was during the phono stage shootout. But during the cable shootout, one of the cable manufacturers that we had was Audience, and their cables were over $3,000 a pair. And one of the things that they included, since somebody mentioned tweak, was this product. And it's
Can you hold that up again, John?
Yeah, close, yeah.
Dead-it?
Deoxit.
Yeah,
Deoxit.
Yeah. You can see I haven't even opened it. But I mean, if you want to tweak to try, I mean, it basically is supposed to do the same thing that Tweak did, which is improve the conductivity of connections. So
Yeah.
I can't recommend it.
Metal to metal. Metal to metal
Yeah.
connection, yeah.
They oxidize, and even without spending a dime, if you simply unplug and replug every single connection every 3 months or 6 months, minimally once a year, you'll be shocked. Sparkling highs. My last time I unplugged and replugged everything, my wife immediately noticed the sparkle.
were you, no, I was gonna make a joke, but let's not go there. Okay, so
So has anyone else tried things in addition to deoxit? So I'm very interested in that. I'd like to know what is the best way of cleaning my connections.
there are,
Unplug and replug. No chemicals needed.
that's one way.
That sounds like an excellent one to me, and I've done that myself. And the deoxit is also reasonable, but I think that there are others.
There's quite a number of the things for taking off tarnish, some audiophile promoted, some others. There are also quite a number of different contact enhancers. I bought a little bottle of something from England. It was like 20 euros at the time because a buddy of mine recommended it. I'm sure there's other things that may work as well. It definitely increased treble energy, a little bit more air. The first week I had it on it, it was a bit too much, and I thought it was kind of too bright, and then it kind of calms down after a while. I've trended away from using it because that first week, every time I use it, it's kind of like I don't want to listen to my system. But I like Brian, I do unplug and plug, and I have some little Teflon. They're made for cleaning. It's an electronic, it's like a Teflon pen, and you can use it to rub, and it'll rub off the oxidation on speaker cables and tube pins. I'm a little concerned about using chemicals for cleaning off oxidation because I don't know what residual it may or may not leave there. Some people say it's not, if you wipe it off, it's not a problem, but I like the manual approach, which my Teflon pen is very similar to just plugging in it and unplugging it.
I agree. I agree with Brian, particularly for a lot of the connections that are unlikely to, be, let's put it this way, quickly have problems. I mean, spade lugs, I understand, but things like AES, EBU plugs, things like that, just the idea of unplugging and plugging back in. I know in my video system, I regularly unconnect and reconnect my HDMI connectors because they're monstrosities. Whoever invented that ought to be shot and sent into space somewhere.
It's like rotating a noisy volume control. You're scruffing the contacts clean. No chemicals necessary. And I'd be scared to death of chemicals doing damage to the equipment or giving me cancer. Seriously.
That's a very real.
Benzene works well, but it's not legal in California.
Right.
So I thought the whole point of having like gold-plated connectors is that they don't oxidize. Same thing with rhodium.
And that's you pay more for that, and even then, then you have to worry about what you're connecting to. So the device that's clamping to it becomes an issue as well. I mean, it's like anything else. You can get down to the real metallurgic. Is that the right level of worrying about this stuff? But just the act of unplugging and plugging again probably is ideal.
Well, especially
Paul McGowan, Love 'em or Leave 'em, calls it spring cleaning.
Okay, so I'd like to let's move.
You spray something in your wall AC socket, and you may have a problem.
Does anyone else have a tweak that they would like to present and talk about? Raise your hand, use the hand up.
I'm sorry. So on the previous topic, has anyone used Ferrotech Nano liquid? So it is liquid with gold and silver, so to enhance the contacts. And I'm just wondering if anybody has used it.
You might be able to get Goldschlager to do the same thing.
Yeah,
You know,
I would recommend against it. I built an awful lot of circuits that had sockets, IC sockets in it, and the IC sockets were not gold. And then if you put something in that is gold, you think, oh yeah, gold connections is good. You have dissimilar metals, and Intel has a paper that they published about not doing that because of the problems that you create with the dissimilar metals contacting each other and electrolysis between the two metals.
An excellent point. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that John Hughes was working on sort of a DIY kind of a similar kind of stuff, but using, I think he was using silver, but he was going to be giving out samples out at one of the shows, not Expona, but the one before that. And I never heard what the result of that was, but he was kind of experimenting with that.
Good. Thank you, Greg. Robbie, David, Craig, I'm reading off names, people who haven't presented anything yet. Michael. We could just chat about stuff and if we've reached the end of people wanting to present things, but I want to make sure everybody has a chance.
I think Michael's trying to unmute himself.
So while he's working on that, I will mention that I am greatly put off by the name of quantum resonant technology from Nordost. However,
that's Nordost speak for something, right?
So it's Nordost speak for, I'm not going to tell you what's in this.
But I'm going to charge you an arm and a leg for it.
They charge an arm and a leg for it.
They didn't invent the name.
Okay, so they have a whole set of products that go under this moniker. So some of them are plugins. You don't pass your power through them. You put them in parallel. You plug them into your power line in parallel to your equipment. And fortunately, one of our members managed to borrow some and loan them to me to try. And I hate the name, but they made an improvement in my system, a jump in clarity, focus in space and timbre. They really work. Now, there's another thing that I've actually developed my own plugins to replace them, but I'm not going to make this a commercial conversation. So the QRTs, the plugins actually do work. And another thing that works from them is their Q core, they call it, which is a ground box, which does a really good job of getting high frequencies off the ground in the vicinity of your components. So I have a dedicated ground line run to a ground post outside of my house. And so I have good grounding, but I plugged in their Q core and it made a definite improvement in focus in space and timbre. And hopefully somebody else has figured out how to connect their microphone at this point.
Fred, do you live in an older home?
No, I mean, so it's 20 years old, 30 years old.
No, he has a lot of older people in it, but not an older home.
But your house wiring's ground might be less than perfect.
So
most houses.
For all of you, okay, so I hooked up a dedicated ground for my system. So presumably I got past house issues. And basically, I don't have old wiring in the house. However, I will say, you don't know that this thing is bad until you've tried it and discover that it doesn't work. So
Right.
it surprised me.
I-
I couldn't. So when I hooked up my dedicated ground, it was eye-opening. It was wonderful. And then I put in this stupid Q-core quantum resonant technology, and it was better.
Yeah.
Having having been to Fred's house and having heard his system, the only change was that we attached and detached his extra ground going out the wall.
Right.
And the difference in black background and clarity was very noticeable. That was without the Q core. It was just, he unplugged it, and it was just an alligator clip, clipped it on, then it went to all the other devices, unclipped it. It was very reproducible, very noticeable. And I think as a tweak, just trying to, make sure your ground is good, and pounding a copper rod into the ground and running a wire through your wall if your wife or spouse or husband let.
A footnote for posterity, i.e. this recording, I suggest remembering that the same corrosion concerns and periodic tightening of connections that we've discussed apply not only to your components, but to your circuit breaker panel and wherever your house wiring's ground is clamped onto a water pipe. Those things in California by building code are outdoors, and in a corrosive environment such as where I live by the ocean, they're real issues. So just remember that you want everything tight, and it may, before you spend thousands of dollars on Nordost, be worth having an electrician tighten everything in your panel.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, Brian. Excellent.
In fact, we could have a whole couple of shows just on the whole power issue.
Oh,
Everything from the power
will.
company on.
We will, trust me. It's on my list.
Steve just volunteered.
Yeah.
Michael,
And
were you able to, 1 second. Michael, were you able to fix your muting issue?
So as regards isolation, I'm not sure if anything was mentioned about Max Townshend's what do they call them, seismic podium. I have all of my including speakers and the rack sitting on these podiums for isolation purposes. They seem to clean up the sound. So for what it's
What was
worth.
the manufacturer again?
Townshend.
Oh, Townsend.
Yeah, Townsend. Yeah,
Townsend.
in England. Max Townsend. I think he's pretty well known. TOWNSHEND.
Are you using their pucks or the actual
I'm using the podiums actually.
Podiums.
I have my audio note speakers on size 2 podiums, and then on my rack 3 size 3 podiums.
I've heard systems with them and without them in the past, and they definitely made a noticeable difference in those systems.
Yeah. It sort of makes clearer sound.
And again, this is a system that it really you buy the correct, as Greg was alluding to earlier, you buy the correct podium for the correct weight in order for it to really work within that specific
weight
that it's supposed to.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that, Michael. Yes, Greg.
I've got a question for the group, and it is, how many people have done any sort of acoustic treatment to their room? How hard was it? Did you get an expert to help you out do that, or because I've got a slap echo problem that I'm trying to figure out how to sort. So any input is great.
Sure, let's go one person at a time. Stephen, you want to give your experience with it? You're muted.
Unmute. The thing that I found, actually, I didn't have so much of a problem with slap echo, although I know where it is. If I go up the stairs to my second floor, right in the stairway area is where I hear my slap echo. Luckily, that's where it is. It's nowhere else. And I'm not sure whether it's diffraction or diffusion that is the ideal way of eliminating that. Maybe other people have dealt with it. But in my room, the thing that I've done is made sure that the first reflective wall was going to be receiving, appropriate diffusion. And then right behind my speakers, I've got glass windows. So replacing the traditional blinds with wood based, and creating the right, folding of those things made a difference. So you could fool around with a lot of this stuff, but that to me is what made a difference. Now I haven't used any on the ceiling, even though I've only got an 8-foot ceiling, but I haven't had a problem that I've noticed, at least to this point, with my speakers. And again, it may also have to do with the speakers. I mean, maybe if you've got big horns or you've got other kinds of devices that will generate high volume reflections and things like that. And I've never run into anybody who really is knowledgeable on acoustics. People who claim to be often aren't, or they're not audiophiles. It's rare that you find an audiophile that is also an acoustician. And I think Greg put up the link to AV Room Service, and the gentleman who runs that does actually that very thing for a lot of studios. So but like I say, they're few and far between.
Right. If I may get in there. So I think not knowing your room, Greg, I mean, whether you have hardwood floors or you have, tile floors or whatever, and then what's on the walls and how many windows. So to answer that question from my standpoint, because I've played with a lot of acoustic treatments over the years, I've done some expensive, fancier things when I rebuilt my room 12 years ago. I coffered my ceiling, and you've seen pictures of my room. I have hanging baffles in the ceiling and the coffer, and that opened up and clarified the sound stage insanely, but it was not cheap. There are things, clouds and things you can put up on the ceiling that'll have a similar effect, so you don't get that ceiling reflection. I did build some sidewall reflection point absorbers with just Owens Corning 703 fiberglass. Then I wrapped in some kind of, heavy material to keep the fiberglass from getting out. And I made a wood frame around it, and I put cellophane on one side to give it a slightly reflective sound so I can flip them around, if I want to. And those made quite a big difference. I also have corner traps, which again, in my room are just 2 layers deep of 2x4 foot Owens Corning fiberglass, heavy fiberglass that I wrapped in material and I have stacked on top of each other. And I compared that to some expensive ASC traps, and they actually worked pretty much. They don't look nearly as nice, but they worked about as well. But in your room, without seeing it, but it could be absorption, it could be.
My room is it's laminate flooring over concrete, and then I've got an 8x12 thick rug on a rug pad in the middle of the room, and I thought that would help.
Shouldn't be worse without it.
It didn't do. I've heard before and after, and it was almost negligible difference.
Really?
2 parallel walls. One wall is a sliding glass door. I've got a couple of those. They're kind of they're rounded reflectors, and I forget the company that makes those. I've got 3 of those along the glass wall to break that up so that it's not a solid wall that it hits, but I still have an issue. So
yeah. We should have a beer party at your house and sit around, drink, and try to figure it out. I think that's a good idea.
I just have ordered a book on acoustics. I hope I can actually understand the physics in it.
I suspect you will, but it may take a few readings.
Oh, I just have some humorous tweaks. A dog or a cat on your lap will definitely make your system sound better. It tames any tendency towards etched sound. So try your pup or your cat on your lap. Don Naples showed me perhaps the greatest tweak of all time. Don Naples showed me that if you put another nickel in the Nickelodeon, the music will keep playing. Don, I love your CD player. I bought your Marantz. Thank you. And my parting audiophile tweak is, or suggestion is, remember all that glitters is not gold.
Yes.
All right. So it's 7:10. We were going to go till 7. It's a little bit after. Some of us probably want to get cooking on dinner or starting on their next bottle of wine or something. So I'll get one more chance if anyone has a tweak they want to present. Fred, I thought you might talk about your ferrites, which definitely have an effect, but maybe another time, unless you want
Don said it all.
You've said it all. All right.
Don said it all, yeah. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well,
Finally,
yes, please.
Marcel Proust, the French writer, when he went to concerts in Paris, he would bring cups with him that would enable him to hear the sound better. It's apocryphal, but I think it actually is probably true.
They used to sell these ears. Does anybody remember those? I forget.
I think so. Something like that, right? Yeah. Anyway, he should have patented them.
He had hearing problems.
On the ferrites and other things, if you're so fortunate as to stumble upon something good, remember the Brill Cream slogan, "A little dab will do ya." One of our members liked the ferrites on his power cords and proceeded to put ferrites at both ends of every single cable in his system, speaker wires, interconnects, and I will tell you, it was counterproductive, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
A dab will do you. Stop when you hear something you like.
My only recommendation is basically make a change, one change only, live with it for a few weeks.
Yeah.
You know, play a variety of things that you're familiar with and say, shit, what happened? I don't like that, but I do like some things about it. So what the hell's happened?
That is a very wise point, Steve. And on tweaks, I'm going to leave it at that.
That's profound. I put a audience front row interconnect, one cable in, and suddenly Nora Jones was sitting in my lap. And I went, wow.
And what did Laura say about that?
2 days later, I said, I get away from me. So
I think it's important.
One change and live with it.
I think it's important to not make tweaks that you can't undo later on. So that you try something, go back and forth on it, and make a decision then.
And the difference between a tweak and a modification, I think. Right. Very good. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I hope you all enjoyed this. We did record this. If you just got to relive it and take notes on it'll be available on our website. And like I said earlier, if you want to have some volunteers, because I'm sorely lacking of people between now and the end of the year, who I've reached out to a lot of people, and not everybody is willing to do it, but it's fun, and you don't have to be an expert, but at least something that's really close to your heart that you want to talk about. I'm going to do another one later this year on just your favorite recordings, whether it's vinyl or digital. Have a couple, and why it just gets your juices flowing, what you love about it, maybe the pressing or something like that. We can do one on analog pressings in the future, but I'm looking for other people to step up and share their love of our hobby. So, all right, well, good night, everybody. I'm going to close out this meeting. Enjoy your dinner, your next glass of wine. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.